Hi everyone. It's Tuesday morning at 10:30 and I've got to say there's something about this time of the morning where you get to stop. Most often for me it's probably the first time that I've stopped, and I just get to go and grab a cup of tea, which is such a nice moment to just regroup on what's been going on earlier in the day. So we were trying to think of ways that we could stay in touch with everybody. And one of the things we thought we would do is to do what we would call a cup of tea with KT, or a cup of KT, as we've come up with. Very cute, I think. It's lovely to see everybody piling in here. I ask for your patience today. This is the first time I've done it, so we'll see how it goes as we move forward today. There was news this morning, I guess, before. So the idea of Cup of KT is that each Tuesday morning I'll invite somebody from across our community to join me for a 15-minute conversation where we just enjoy a nice cup of tea and talk about something that's important to us. Today I'm really excited to have Dr Brett Fritsch. He'll be joining me in a minute. I'm just waiting for his name to come up on the bottom of the screen and then I'll let him in. Brett is an amazing orthopaedic surgeon. Not only does he run public clinics, he continues to practice as a private practitioner. He's a teacher in this area of medicine. And I had the opportunity to meet Brett, would be over a month ago, I guess now, when we were discussing some of his concerns as it relates to, I'm just going to see if I can find him to get him in. Not yet, he's still coming. As it related to his concerns around what was going on with healthcare and the provision of healthcare services in Australia. While Brett's coming, I'm sure he had his, Brett doesn't drink tea, so he was going to bring his can of Coke and sit with me this morning to have the conversation while we're waiting for him to join us. One of the things I did think I would just touch on quickly is the media this morning around the moves by the federal government to actually start a conversation around net zero. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for everything you've done in encouraging that conversation along. I think it's an unusual thing when somebody needs to tap into somebody else's bravery to have the strength to stand up, but clearly we've done that. So congratulations to everyone. I would encourage us, though, to be really mindful that it's easy to have a conversation that goes out to 2050, because the people who are having that conversation won't be here to be held accountable to it. So I think it's really important that we actually push our government to get outside this ridiculous party politicking that's going on at the moment and lead us well, not just into the next 10 years, but specifically for this next term of government when it comes about. Now, I can see Brett is here now, so I'm going to just let him in as hopefully a live chat. It's one of the fun things of, and there he is. Hi, Brett, how are you this morning?
Hey, Kylie, good. As always, whenever I'm talking on anything, it's the IT issues. I've been watching you talk and I've been listening to you talk, and but figuring out how to join you has been the challenge. But sorry for the delay there.
Oh, please don't apologise. I think that's one of the fun things about COVID, is learning to do everything by ourselves. Yeah, you can't call in the expert to say, "Can you show me how to do this?" So, but thank you for joining me this morning. I know you've got your can of Coke somewhere close by, yeah, that you can enjoy. Yeah.
My cup
is
of
this
tea,
your normal?
10:30. I've had one or two by now.
That's what I was just about to ask. Is this your normal tea break, or is this well past when you normally have morning tea?
No, pretty much. I would have done a couple of cases by now and had a Coke Zero, so normal for me.
Well, thank you for fitting us into your day today, Brett, because I know you are a really busy guy. There's a few people that have been able to join us online, so I thought it might be a nice way to start. If you want to give the people watching a little bit of background on who you are and how you and I came to meet.
Sure. I think you've introduced me a little. My name's Brett Fritsch. I live in Hunters Hill. I live here. My wife's family's lived in Hunters Hill for over 40 years. It's kind of where Sarah grew up. So, as always, there's a fairly high chance a man will live in his mother-in-law's postcode. And I'm very fortunate that it's this one. It's a great area. I love it here. We've been here for 10 or 15 years ourselves now, and it's a great place to live. I grew up in the Riverina on a farm in Temora down near Wagga. Did my medical training and surgical training in Sydney. A lot of the surgical training actually around the world, working here. I worked in the US for a while. I've worked in France, And I'm an orthopaedic surgeon. So I specialize in knees. I do pretty much exclusively knee surgery, though I work on the trauma roster at RPA. So I work in the public healthcare system. I spend about half my time in the public system at Royal Prince Alfred, and I spend the other half in my private practice, which is combined with Royal Prince Alfred and mostly at the Mater Hospital in North Sydney. And I do exclusively knees, a lot of clinical stuff, a lot of research. We run a research lab as part of my clinical practice. I believe in research and development. And I do a lot of lecturing and teaching and traveling around the world on top of the clinical work.
Fantastic. Brett, I know we were lucky, I was lucky enough to be introduced to you, it must be about a month ago now, actually by Kristen Locke, who is the founder of the North Sydney's independent movement. And we were brought together to have a really, what I think is a really important conversation around health service provision in Australia. I think just so everyone here knows, I actually spent time working for New South Wales Department of Health, so I was a health promotion officer, but then specifically I worked in the hospital system for a period of my life when the hospitals were being moved around. And so I was fascinated by the conversation you and I had, and it relates to an organisation called Honeysuckle Healthcare, is that right?
Yeah,
Would you like to tell everyone here what's going on?
Yeah, so I think Honeysuckle Healthcare is a situation that's crystallised the change that's occurring in the healthcare system that I think is a little bit underreported and understood. And my concern is it's going to have really significant impact on the way we access healthcare, on the way patients access healthcare in the coming years. And briefly, you know, these things are often pretty complex, but Honeysuckle Healthcare is a buying group that's being formed between one of the Australian health funds, an American health fund, and some of the smaller funds coming together to act as a buying group. And what that is a way of negotiating with hospitals and GPs and specialists and allied health, physios, etc., on how they'll cover their patients for healthcare. And I think the broader issue that this crystallizes is this transition towards value-based contracting, which is a very boring sounding term, but essentially at the moment, if you're a patient of mine, you come in, you can see any doctor. We don't have specific contracts with specific health funds. As long as you're covered, if you're not covered by private health, you go through the public health system. This is mainly about changes through the public. This is about changes in the private. You come see me, we'd sit down, talk about your healthcare problem, and we'd determine the best way to treat you. Between me as the treating doctor and you as the patient, Kylea, we say, you need this treatment. Now, obviously, there's checks and balances in the Australian system to make sure that treatment is a kind of a scientifically based, proper treatment. Provided it is, I offer you the treatment, we go off and do that treatment for you, and the health funds that you're insured with pays for the component of that. What value-based contracting does is change that to where, firstly, I've got to make sure I have a specific contract with the provider that you happen to be insured with. If I don't, then it gets very complicated. And then when I say you need this particular treatment, there's a third person sitting in that room, and they're actually probably just sitting on a phone call and they're checking boxes to say, well, do we feel that that's a good value treatment? And the rub is that they determine the value. So it's not me saying you need this treatment, you saying I want this treatment. There's a third party saying, well, let's just see if we approve that treatment. And the word for it really is managed care. The idea that someone else will determine what's your best healthcare and who you can see to access it is a big change. The biggest example of it's the US style of healthcare, where the insurers decide what represents value, not the doctor, not the patient, but the health insurer, and they dictate what treatment is available to that patient.
So that's a really significant shift for us here in Australia, isn't it? I mean, I don't know, with respect, I don't know anybody who often shares messages about how wonderful the American healthcare system is. It's often, we see it through television drama, we hear it through friends and family, that it's a bit of a mess over there. It is a case where insurance companies are deciding who gets what. Are you saying that with Honeysuckle doing this deal to come into Australia, that's effectively what we're now facing here as consumers in Australia?
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is it's already starting to happen. It's not purely Honeysuckle, but Honeysuckle is a big step further in that direction. to create an entity that has a lot more power in the market that's partnered with a US provider, Cigna, to be a part of that. And they're not the only one trying to do this kind of system. I think there's a little bit of a vacuum around private healthcare regulation. The funds are stepping into that vacuum to act as, you know what, well, if there's a vacuum here, we'll step in and dictate how it should run. And it's sort of managed care by stealth. It's not just this initiative, but this is another big step in a direction that I really don't think is the best direction for the Australian healthcare system.
So it sounds like it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, of course. So these things never occur as a one-off thing. It's the frog boiling in the water. You're sitting in there, and at the moment there'll be parts of it that appeal on the surface. You know, one part is they'll suggest that there'll be no gap fees for out of cost. Now that sounds really, really good. And of course it does. Everyone wants to pay less for a good provision, but it takes the issue from a quality-based healthcare system to a cost-based healthcare system, value-based contracting. And in our current system, some doctors do cost more than others. And but as long as there's transparency where the patient knows what something's going to cost, then I think one that has lots of providers providing lots of service will be competing on a quality basis rather than just a race to cheap. And a race to cheap is a race to things have to be taken out of that system. I don't think we want to remove aspects of care to hit what an insurer feels is good value. I mean, can you imagine seeing me for a knee replacement? And you might be younger than the average. You've had my dad working on the farm, working extra hard, has a few accidents, injures their knee. So instead they need a knee replacement at 50, and the average might be 70. Now, this is just a hypothetical example. This isn't proposed at the moment, but certainly when I worked in the US, this is what we would do. I would say, listen, Dad, you need a knee replacement, or Phil Fritsch, you need a knee replacement. And then rather than just, we've determined it, we go off and do the knee replacement, then I have to write to the health insurer. And then the health insurer has to approve it. And then they'll say, you know what, you're way too young, you're much younger, I'm not going to approve that. You need to do a few more years of physiotherapy or a few more years of this, or you need to wait. And it's not covered. And it just, the primary point of the Australian healthcare system, there are two people sitting in the room, Kylie. There's the doctor and there's the patient. And between them, they decide the best treatment strategy for them. And then they go ahead and do the treatment. This puts a health insurer right in the middle of that discussion. And I don't know how you feel when you call a big corporation to ask for approval and you get bounced from one thing to another, to a phone that's not our department, sorry. And then computer says no, call center says no. Imagine that's your healthcare. Imagine that's you trying to get your cancer treatment or your knee replacement or whatever that may be. And I've worked in that system. I worked at Duke University for a year. Every doctor has to have a PA to do the whole world of paperwork just to get approval to do what we would consider pretty basic, simple healthcare system. I would love to find anyone that looks at that system and turns to us and says, geez, I want that one instead. That looks great.
It actually sounds crazy. And I know when we first met, you and I talked about this really specifically because my mum had actually just had a double knee replacement. And, she is someone who's still really young. And we specifically talked about the fact my mum spent a week in rehab down here in Sydney because she's from the country, from a place called Canberra. And but you made the point to me that under this new system, it made the case that my mother wouldn't have qualified for rehab and she would have actually been sent home because of her age, because she was younger.
Yeah, well, rehab's a really good example. So there's a few other, not Honeysuckle, a few others already contracting to say, listen, if a surgeon guarantees to do your knee replacement without rehab, so sending them straight home. And to be honest, Kylie, a lot of patients can go home. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do. And we're certainly heading in that direction anyway. But the key is that the patients and the doctors are heading in that direction rather than being contracted to enforce that. There's a huge difference treating a statistic. I do a lot of research, and we publish stuff and that would say, listen, this works on average better than this works on average. But there's no individual patient who is average. And it should be up to the doctor and that patient to figure out, without undue commercial pressure, to change their healthcare strategy just to match that number. But yeah, there's some places now in Sydney where if your mother didn't qualify for their program, to go, so they identify that she's a high risk of needing rehab, then she doesn't qualify to go to that hospital and use that surgeon and use that pathway. Now, these are at the moment minor examples, but I think this kind of thing like honeysuckle is another step towards that, going from the thin edge to the wedge to the whole wedge. And I mean, even the term of value is interesting. The data, look at the US. The US spends 17% of their GDP on healthcare, and we spend about 10%. They spend about $10,500 per patient per person per year. We spend $5,000, and yet we're the third. A gross healthcare outcome is we're the third longest living nation on earth, just behind the Swiss and the Japanese at 82, nearly 83 years, and they're at 79 years and number 26. So I'm not sure how you measure value in healthcare, but spending half as much with a longer life expectancy seems like we already have a pretty high value healthcare system.
So the thing that really hits me about this though, Brett, is how is this happening and when it's not being discussed? Like I wasn't aware that this was happening until you and I met about a month ago. I'm assuming that there is government involvement here somewhere. As you said, there's a gap at the moment, so that's why this industry group is stepping in. You know, what is the role that our federal government should be playing in this discussion?
I think it's a good question. Why does one thing catch the news attention and another? I mean, I've had a few little things going on like COVID and whatnot that's probably distracted them a little, but I think also it may well reflect that this move in this direction is what the sitting government's happy with. You know, I mean, walking into Parliament right now and saying we've got a policy where we're going to bring in managed healthcare is probably not going to get a lot of positivity, whereas letting it occur by stealth and achieving the same outcomes even better. Why stand up and put your head on the chopping block when someone else will do it for you by stealth? So and maybe that's a reason. I mean, it's really interesting to me that the honeysuckle health application was submitted to the ACCC in December 24, 2020. Now,
holy moly, that's fast.
No, but that's Christmas Eve. So
yeah.
There's a good way to avoid, attention and things. And I don't know, it's not a very sexy topic in some ways. Healthcare is, but it's pretty easy to look at aspects of healthcare, look at doctors and go, geez, anything that they're overpaid. So it's good to make a way to pay them less. We're pretty easy to make an argument towards, this is all about value. And everybody seems to, the stories of the American healthcare system tend to be negative, but, a lot of the time when we ask someone about their healthcare experience here, they tend to highlight the negative aspects as well. It's only, I think, if you step outside and look at the alternatives, and having worked in multiple systems, I've worked in them, that on the ground of it, we have a fabulous healthcare system with a lot of choice in it. And it's about, steering attention and tricking attention, I think, rather when you break it down. I think most people would be horrified with the idea of heading towards a managed care system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Brett. And I've been watching the comments come up as we talk, and most of them, or all of them, have been some version of what the, how is this not being discussed? But then also people saying they're not surprised that it's happening by stealth, because that seems to be a bit of a modus operandi with our, governmental system in the last period of time. So thank you so much for sharing this with me and with everybody today. I think for all of us, it's a good wake-up call. I agree with you. Having worked across health advocacy for nearly 30 years, we have one of the best healthcare systems in the world. And I think that that's something that Australia should be, and Australian citizens should be really proud of and actually prepared to fight to maintain. I'm horrified by the thought that the decisions around my healthcare and my treatment could be taken out of my hands and my doctor's hands and actually handed over to an insurance agency. It's hard enough to make my home insurance work when it comes to deciding what value your tiles are. I certainly don't want to be asking a health insurer to decide what value of my hip joint or, my coronary surgery. So I think this is a really important point for us to be aware of and to call it out and to kind of watch. Thank you for bringing my attention to it. As I said, I wasn't aware of it until you and I spoke. And I just hope that as we move forward in this next kind of, 6 to 12 months, we can really bring it out of the darkness, because I think that's where that whole push for greater integrity and transparency in politics, this is where it's coming from. You can't just let our leadership sit there and go, oh, well, we didn't do it. It just happened on our watch. That's not leading. And I think that's, what I'm hoping, that's the climate change that we need to make in Canberra. Wouldn't it be lovely if we actually had leaders who stepped up and fought to give us, continue to protect our best quality of life? So, yeah, it's fabulous, fabulous. Thanks, Brett. I really appreciate it. I've finished my cup of tea. How'd your Coke go?
I'll get into the Coke.
Thanks to everyone for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoyed that over your cup of tea. As I said, we'll be doing this Tuesday mornings going forward at 10:30, and we'd love your ideas about other people we can speak to. We'll stay in touch with Brett over the coming months, because I'm personally really interested to see what is going on here and to see what more we can be doing to raise awareness around this. I just want to finish touching on something that Brett mentioned when I said, why don't we know about this? And the comment that he offered was that there's been a bit going on. We've had this thing called COVID. My challenge to our leaders would be that the leaders amongst us should be the best of us, and they should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So just because this isn't a COVID issue doesn't mean that this shouldn't be drawing our attention and getting our attention. So to everyone on this call or watching this video later, let's live larger than what we're currently being encouraged to live, and let's live more consciously of the decisions that are being made around us. So thanks so much, Brett, and thanks everyone. We'll see you again soon. Bye.
Thanks, Kylie. Bye.
Bye.
Authorised by Kylea Tink, North Sydney, New South Wales.